I found a photo jammed behind a warped nautical chart at the bottom of my sea chest, stuck there with salt and time. I wasn't even supposed to be digging in that thing. It was 3 in the morning, the kind of insomnia where your own heartbeat annoys you. And I'd started doing that nervous, pointless cleaning. Wiping down a perfectly clean kitchenette, refolding towels, realigning the coffee mugs. My apartment's 2 blocks from the harbor, so even with the windows shut, I can hear the masts clinking and the low slap of water against pilings. It's like the ocean breeze right outside my wall. Normally, it calms me down. That night, it just made me feel watched. I ended up dragging out the old sea chest my dad left me. The lid stuck halfway up, swollen from humidity, and when it gave, the smell came with it. Old rope, mildew, faint diesel. I started pulling out junk. An ancient pair of split fins, a cracked mask, a faded navy ball cap that still had a crust of salt along the brim, and then the Ziploc envelope of photos. Most of them were waterlogged, the edges puckered, ink bleeding in places. Dad and me on various docks, on different boats, on beaches with half-sunk driftwood. Me small and gap-toothed, him tall and sunburnt and tired-eyed. One photo pulled my breath out of my chest for a second. I'm maybe 16 in it. Wetsuit peeled down to my waist. Hair slicked back, face smudged with engine grease. I'm grinning like an idiot, holding a stringer of grouper that almost drags my arm down. Next to me is my father. He's got that wiry, almost smile he did when he was actually happy, but didn't want to show it. There's dried blood on his knuckles if you look close. Behind us, the water in the marina is black, the lights making gold snakes on the surface. That was our last hunt together. Dad used to say he needed the ocean to decompress when he got back from over there. He'd say it like that. Never Iraq or the Gulf or whatever deployment he just crawled home from. Just over there or down below, like the whole world beyond our harbor was one big dark compartment. He was Navy, and for the first half of my life, he lived more in steel tubes than in our house on the bay. Subs mostly. A couple of quiet deployments he never fully explained, where his mail came late and thin and the calls, when they happened, were full of static and weird delays. He'd call for some cramped comms room, and you could hear pumps and fans whining in the background. "I'm fine," he'd say, voice grainy. "It smells like feet and metal in here, but I'm fine. I love you. Tell your mom I'll be back before you blink." He never was. Not really. Mom and I spent those months watching the tide come in and out, listening to the pipes knock on the walls at night, waiting for news that never came the way we thought it would. She'd sit at the kitchen table with the cheap cordless press to her chest after every call, eyes red, like she'd just walked back from a funeral. It was hardest on her. I wasn't exactly a calming presence. I grew up in a town where every kid either went into the service, into the yard, or into the water. I chose trouble for a while. I snuck out of the house to drink cheap beer on the end of the dilapidated pier. I stole fuel from unattended skiffs. Got into fights with other dock brats over whose dad's boat had right-of-way out in the channel. I got good at slithering out of consequences, saying the right thing to the harbor master, crying at the right moment for the cop who caught us trespassing on the yacht club dock. Playing stupid. It worked. Until it didn't. I was 16 when he took me on what he called our first real hunt. Not the usual weekend spearing lionfish off the jetty or snagging drum near the wrecked buoy. I dropped a spear into plenty of fish by then. But this was the one he'd been talking about since I was in middle school. The old bastard he'd seen on sonar a dozen times, but never landed. A grouper the size of a man that lived near the base of the dam upriver, right where the river widened into the reservoir. "I've been chasing him since you were in diapers," he'd say, half joking. "You're gonna be the one to stick him. It's only right." The night before, I was at my little desk by the window, a math book open, a notebook full of bullshit work I'd never turn in. The lamp hummed. The bay outside was a breathing black plate. My phone was in my lap, screen brightness turned down, thumbs flying as I texted Ollie about some party on a houseboat that weekend. Dad's bulk filled my doorway like he always did, one hand on the swollen frame so it didn't squeak. "Get some sleep, Cass." His voice was low so it wouldn't carry down the thin hallway. "Tide's gonna be slack at 4. We want to be out of the harbor before then. Are you actually gonna let me shoot this time?" I asked, shoving my phone under a copy of Algebra 2, as if he gave a shit about linear equations. "Or am I spotting again while you and Uncle Lane take turns missing?" He huffed a laugh. "Watch your mouth, and we'll see." He started to back away, then hesitated and leaned into the doorway again. The hall light behind him made a halo around his shaggy hair and the old sailing tattoos on his forearm. His eyes were that faded crystal blue I hated because they were so good at seeing right through me. He didn't say anything this time. He just gave me a look that said, in his language, "Put the phone up or I will." And if he took it, it would go into some locker on the boat and I'd never see it again. I made a show of dropping it into my desk drawer. He grunted, satisfied enough, and walked down the hall. The floorboards creaked under his weight in a way I'd learned to track since I was little. 2 slow steps past my door. 3. The house we lived in had started its life as some kind of fish shack on pilings before Dad and Lane renovated it with leftover lumber and stolen nails. The whole place shifted and moaned with the tide. I tried to finish a practice test. I think I solved 2 problems before the numbers started to smear. At some point, I must have dropped my head onto my arms because the next thing I knew, a heavy thud shook the house hard enough to rattle the glass in the window. Not the pipes, not the normal settling creaks. Something hit the side of the house. Hard. For a minute, I lay there under the blanket, eyes open, heart up in my throat. The sound from outside filtered in. The constant slap of bay water against the pilings, the clink of halyards tapping aluminum mass, the distant whine of a truck crossing the bridge. Then voices. I slid out of bed and padded to my door, bare feet on cold wood. I pressed my ear to the cheap hollow. "Nathan, if they find out what you're doing," Mom's voice came up the hall in a harsh whisper that still managed to shake. "You're going to wait, Cassidy," he hissed back. I could picture the way he'd lean in close when he was trying not to yell. "And you're going to have her more scared than she already is." "They already tossed one body up on the rocks," she shot back. "How many kids do you need to bury before it's enough?" My stomach clenched. "Shep, listen to me." His voice dropped, like he suddenly remembered the walls were not made of steel and there were no watertight doors here. "What happened to Clemson's little girl is unforgivable. You know that, and the sheriff can't do a damn thing about it. You're gonna look that man in the eyes next Sunday at church and tell him we just let it go." She was drunk. Mom's voice broke. She got on that boat, and now everyone's whispering that she jumped. That's she. The board under my left foot betrayed me with a long, drawn-out groan. The house was old enough that it had a voice of its own, and that board, right there by my door, was a snitch. Silence slammed down the hallway. I froze, mouthing fuck like that would help. "Nathan," Mom started again, quieter. "How am I supposed to explain to Cassidy why you're being dragged off this dock in cuffs?" "Huh? You gonna tell her it was worth it while they're reading you your rights?" I heard his footsteps coming down the hall, each one a small tremor in the boards, then louder as he hit that squeaky plank outside my room. "Shelb." I threw myself back into bed, yanked the blanket up, and drilled my eyes shut so hard stars danced behind them. My chest burned with held breath. The door creaked open. His shadow cut out what little yellow light seeped under my curtain from the street lamp out by the harbor. I could smell the bay on him from across the room, salt and fish and wet aluminum. The floor complained under his weight. Then the door clicked shut again. I turned onto my side, heart still hammering, and listened to the murmur of them arguing all the way until the sound of it blended into the black water lapping under our house. The second time he woke me, his whisper was a knife. "It's time to go." I jerked awake, disoriented. The neon blue numbers on my alarm clock said 3:41. My breath came out in visible puffs in the dim light. The moon was between clouds. A cold stripe of it cut across my floor. Dad stood in the heavier dark near the door. Something was wrong with him. His stubbled face was streaked with grime, and something darker that might have been dried blood. The collar of his hoodie was damp. His shaggy brown hair, which he usually kept cropped short enough to pass inspection even on shore, hung in wet clumps over his forehead. He slid a black beanie down over it, and I saw, in that brief slice of moonlight, the edge of a jagged cut near his hairline. His knuckles were swollen and raw. "Dad," I pushed up on my elbows. "What the hell happened to you?" He scanned my room like he was clearing a compartment, eyes sharp, taking in the window, the corners, the pile of clothes. "Get dressed," he whispered. "Warm stuff. We're losing time. What about Mom?" "Quiet," he snapped. "She'll kill me if she knows I'm taking you. So don't wake her, yeah?" He stepped back into the hallway without waiting for an answer. Questions shot through me in a flurry. Where had he gone after that argument? Who had put that cut on his head? Who was that body on the rocks Mom mentioned? Why did his hoodie smell faintly of stale beer under the salt and diesel, like the inside of the marina bar? But layered over all of that was the one hook he knew would drag me right along after him. We were going after the grouper. A December wind knifed through the drafty house, and I hurried into thermal leggings, wool socks, a long sleeve, and then my camo-patterned bib waders. The neoprene was stiff from hanging in the cold garage. I shoved my feet into my muck boots, fingers already numb at the tips. By the time I cracked my door and slipped into the hallway, he was in his little office, the one room in the house that always smelled like CLP oil and salt and paper. The gun cabinet glowed faintly in the spill from the harbor light through the blinds. "Dad," I whispered. He shot me a look that pinned my throat shut. "Keep your voice down," he said, barely moving his lips. "Last thing I need is your mother waking up and chaining herself to the skiff." He unlocked the cabinet with a key he wore on a cord under his shirt. The hinges squealed an inch before he slowed them with his hand. Inside, the guns were lined up with military neatness. 2 shotguns, a stubby AR he never talked about, an old wood-stocked .30-06 with a scope that looked like it belonged in a museum. He took the bolt action down, checked the chamber out of habit, set it on the desk. Then he crouched to grab a metal box of ammo and a pair of marine binoculars scarred with old dings. "Here." He pressed the binoculars into my hands. They were cold enough to hurt. "You keep eyes. I'll do the heavy lifting. So I don't get to shoot it?" I asked, half whining, half testing him. "Don't start." He snapped the cabinet shut and turned the lock. Plenty of time for that. We slipped out the front door, the hinges soothed with bar soap long ago, so they didn't squeal. The December air hit me like a slap. My nose started to run instantly, and the exposed skin around my eyes burned. The dock lamps cast weak orange circles on the black satin water below. Dad's truck sat where it always did, nose toward the road, a faint crust of salt on the windshield. He threw the rifle and the ammo behind the seats, and I slid into the passenger side, hugging the binoculars to my chest for warmth. He turned the engine over. The old diesel coughed, then caught with a low, familiar rumble. We rolled out of our tiny driveway and onto the two-lane that traced the curve of the bay toward town. The harbor lights laid a glitter path on the water to our left. To our right, the marshes were still and silver, the reeds stiff with frost. The world at that hour belonged to fishermen, cops, and things that lived under the surface. As we came up on the marina, the only real light in that whole strip shone out from Baker's Fuel and Tackle. You could smell that place before you saw it. Old bait, gasoline, boiled coffee, fried something. The big overhead bulbs made the sheen of fuel on the water shimmer like a sick rainbow. Dad glanced over at me, then back at the little block building up ahead. "You want something warm before we head up the river?" "Yes," I said immediately. My teeth were already chattering from the drafts seeping through the truck's door seals. He snorted, turned on his blinker out of habit, even though there was no one behind us, and pulled up to the fuel dock. A beat-up gray sedan had just backed away from the pumps and was easing down the road as we came in. Something about the way its back bumper dragged made me think of those shitty college kids who launched their dad's boats too shallow and ripped the skegs off. He killed the engine. The silence after the diesel shut off was abrupt. Just the slap of wake against pilings and a gull somewhere complaining. "All right then," he said, pocketing his keys. "Let's see what they got." I slid out of the truck and hurried to his side, blowing into my cupped hands. The wooden planks of the dock thrummed faintly under my boots with each slap of the water. The bell over the bait shop door jingled as we went in. Heat and the smell of burnt coffee wrapped around me. "Mornin', Nathan." Mr. Baker looked up from where he was restocking squid in little styrofoam trays. His beard was more gray than white these days, his skin the color of old leather. "You boys heading out early." He caught himself and gave me a wink. "And girl," Dad managed a tired smile. "Taking little Annie Oakley here upriver," he said. "Finally gonna let her shoot something besides plastic bottles." I peeled away from them, prowling the cramped aisles between hanging jigs and shelves of chips. I knew this place layout better than my own school. The candy rack near the front counter sat right in Mr. Baker's line of sight, which was unfair. I loitered by the energy bars until Dad turned to ask something about the current up by the dam. While Baker's eyes were on him, I slid a covered chocolate bar off the rack and into the deep pocket of my jacket with a move I'd practiced too many times. I drifted back toward them, trying to look bored and harmless. "Current's weird as hell up there since they changed the release schedule," Baker was saying. "Heavier than she looks. You be careful, you hear?" "Always am." Dad set a steaming styrofoam cup on the counter, then a second one that smelled like hot chocolate. Baker rang them up, eyeing him. "That'll be." He paused, gaze flicking to me in a way that said, "I see you." "5 even." "Shit." I felt Dad's eyes cut down to me without him even moving his head. "Have a good one, Mr. Baker," he said, voice clipped as he handed over a crumpled bill. "We'll bring you back something that's not full of microplastics." "You do that." Baker slid his eyes between us again. "And Cassidy?" My name on his lips felt like a verdict. "Yes, sir." I forced my shoulders not to hunch. "You can put that candy bar back now." "What are you talking about?" I tried to pull innocent, but my voice came out too fast, too high. "Cassidy." Dad's tone dropped, the way it did right before he'd ripped someone on the boat for almost losing a finger. The foam cups in his scarred hands flexed. "Sir," Baker started, maybe to diffuse, but Dad shot him a look sharp enough to cut squid with, and the old man shut his mouth. He'd served 2, in some war before my time. He knew that tone. Heat crawled up my neck. I yanked the bar out of my pocket and slapped it on the nearest shelf. The bell over the door jingled again as we walked out. Now the cold felt earned. For the first minute back in the truck, the only sound was the rumble of the engine and the slosh of diesel in the tank. "You think I'm blind and stupid?" Dad finally said, eyes on the road. "Why would you do that, Cass?" I stared down at the binoculars in my lap. "I don't think you're stupid," I muttered. I don't know." "You don't know?" He slapped his open palm against the steering wheel hard enough that the whole truck shuddered. I jumped. Hot chocolate sloshed onto my glove. "I thought I raised you better than that." I flinched like he'd hit me instead. "I'm sorry," I said after a second. The words came out small. He blew air out of his nose, the way he did when a ballast calculation didn't add up. We drove in a silence that was almost worse than yelling. Out the windshield, the Tulane curved around the last row of houses and climbed toward the bridge that crossed the river where it narrowed before widening into the reservoir. The water under the bridge looked different. Darker. Less friendly. "You know, I'm not here all the time," he said finally. "No shit, right? When I'm gone, your mother's got everything on her shoulders. House bills you. The least you can do is not act like some dock rat who steals from the one guy in town who'd still extend you a line of credit." I said I'm sorry. My eyes burned. I stared out at the black surface of the river instead of at him. "You're the one who's never here." His jaw flexed. The truck crested the bridge, and for a second, the river spread out below us like a dark muscle. A thick fog hugged the far bank where the trees stopped, and the first fingers of flooded land began. His phone vibrated in the cup holder. The screen lit his face with ghost light. He glanced at it, then picked it up and thumbed it on. "Will," he said. "What's up, brother?" The voice on the other end was tinny, but I recognized the slow, southern drawl of Will, one of the guys from Dad's old boat. He'd crashed on our couch enough times that I knew the smell of his cigarettes. "It's done," Will said. "No hello." "Yeah." Dad's tone went flat. "You sure?" "Positive." Tide took what was left of him. "You got the girl." Dad's eyes flicked to me, then back to the road. His face didn't change. "Yeah," he said. "She's with me." There was a pause on the line. "Nate," Will said, "it ain't too late to drop her at Ali's and let me handle the rest. She doesn't need to be in this. You know that." "We'll meet you at the slip," Dad said. 15 out. He hung up before Will could argue. I stared at him. The river fog seemed to push right up against the glass. "What was that about?" I asked. "Nothing you need to worry about." His knuckles tightened on the wheel. "The hell it isn't," I shot back. "What do you mean it's done?" "Who was in?" His phone thumped back into the cup holder. He didn't answer. The road narrowed as we left town proper and followed the river. The houses thinned, then vanished, replaced by thick stands of winter bear, cypress, and pine right up to the water's edge. Every few miles, a dirt track branched off towards some hidden fishing camp or illegal shack. After maybe 15 minutes, we turned onto one of those tracks. It was nothing but mud ruts and crushed oyster shell. Easy to miss if you didn't know exactly where to look. Branches scraped the sides of the truck with a screech like metal against metal. I bounced in my seat, grabbing the handle above the window as we slid a little before the tires caught again. "Grab the binoculars and get ready," he said, scanning the shadows ahead like he expected them to move. "We'll be quiet from here on." "You think we'll see it?" I asked. "The grouper?" He didn't respond. He killed the headlights, and the world slammed dark. Only the faint glow of the dashboard and the ghost of the river to our left. We crept down toward the water in near silence. At the end of the track, the trees opened onto a tiny, hidden landing. A slab of cracked concrete, half collapsed, with a rusted-out handrail and a bent unauthorized access sign. His skiff sat tied to a stump nearby, paint flaking, hull slick with algae along the waterline. The cold had turned the wet rope hard as bone. He parked the truck in the shadow of the cypress, killed the engine. The quiet that fell was heavy. Water moving. Frogs. The distant hum of the dam's turbines. A low, steady growl upriver. "Let's move," he murmured. "Hoods up." We carried the rifle and gear down to the skiff. Our boots clanged on the trailer guides, then thudded on the soft planks. The hull rocked under our combined weight. I could feel the water through it, a slow, cold push. Dad untied the line with quick, practiced motions, shoved us off with a boot, and dropped the outboard. It hit the water with a hollow glunk. He didn't start it right away. He let us drift a moment into deeper black, the dim outline of the landing fading behind us. "Life jacket," he said. "I'm fine." "Cass." I put the binocular strap around my neck and shrugged into the faded orange vest lying in the bow. The straps were stiff with dried salt. He pulled the starter cord. The outboard coughed, then caught, its low growl vibrating through my feet. He kept it barely above idle. We slid along the shore, past drowned trees whose bare branches clawed at the sky, past old fence posts rising out of the water like rotten teeth. The further upriver we went, the more I could feel the dam. It started as a pressure in my ears, like being in a plane that was descending too fast. Then a vibration in my teeth. The turbines up there were moving thousands of gallons a second through concrete arteries, and all of it hummed through the boat's thin hull. Dad cut the motor before we came into sight of it. The sudden quiet made the hum louder. We drifted, guided mostly by the slow tug of current. "Down," he whispered. "Seat. Stay low." I sank onto the wooden bench along the side, binoculars cold against my chest. The air had that thick, wet chill that drops into bones and sits there. Each breath tasted like iron and moss. Somewhere, something big splashed, then went still. Up ahead, the dark mass of the dam rose out of the water. 6 massive concrete outflow mouths gaped like empty sockets. The spill lights were off this time of night. Only a few red maintenance beacons glowed, reflecting in long, bleeding lines on the water. Near the center bay, the surface shimmered. He ghosted us into the shadow of a row of half-submerged pilings. I could make out an old steel maintenance platform bolted to the face of the dam about 20 yards to our right, slick with algae. A rusted ladder ran down to it. Another, newer ladder angled from the platform down into the water, its lower rungs vanishing into black. "Eyes," he breathed. I raised the binoculars, fingers stiff. The rubber eye cups stuck to my skin. For a moment, all I saw was black on black. Faint ripples, the ghostly reflection of the red beacons, the hint of trees along the shore to either side. Then something moved below the surface. A long, slow roll of a back, pale in the dim light. Tiny bursts of phosphorescence followed it, like stars blinking on and off. A school of baitfish erupted near the center outflow, silver bodies flashing. Behind them, something bigger moved, a shadow inside a shadow. Grouper, I thought. Big one. Despite everything, the argument, the cut on Dad's head, Baker's look, I felt a thrill. This was it. He'd finally brought me up here to the place only he and a handful of buddies knew about. The off-limits water straight under the dam, cut off from the public with buoys and fines. It was beautiful in a dead, industrial way. The water glass flat, the dam a dark wall against the stars. Our breath fogged in the air. Something rustled on the far side of the outflow. The first man stumbled into the circle of faint red light from one of the dam beacons, splashing up to his knees. He came out of nowhere, from the deep shadow under the spill structure, flailing, dragging himself up onto the slick concrete lip like he'd just crawled out of hell. Steam rose from his wet clothes into the cold. "Oh God," he gasped, voice echoing weirdly against the concrete. "Oh Jesus, he's still out there. He's still fucking out there, James." A second man hauled himself up beside him, water streaming off his jeans and cheap running shoes. He wore a dark hoodie soaked through, earrings flashing in the dim. There was something glistening on his cheek, more reflective than water. Blood, I realized. His shaggy black hair clung to his skull. They both looked behind them, toward the black mouth of the nearest outflow, like something might come up after them any second. Every hair on my body stood up. This was wrong. Nobody was supposed to be out here. There were fences, locks. The water alone would kill you if you got too close to the intakes. I turned to Dad, heart climbing. He put a finger to his lips, eyes not leaving the man. Then he shifted the rifle into my hands and took the binoculars from me in the same smooth motion. "Get ready," he mouthed. For a second, none of it connected. Hunt, I thought. Grouper. Deer. I trained the scope on paper targets 100 times on the sandbar with him, lying in the wet grit with ear pro on, tasting salt and sunscreen and his coffee breath. He wanted me to aim at them. Not fish, not deer, people. The wood-stocked rifle felt heavier than it ever had, the cold metal of the barrel biting my palm. I fumbled it to my shoulder, heart bucking. The skiff rocked under the shift in weight. "The fuck, Dad?" I hissed, barely moving my lips. His hand tightened on my elbow. His eyes, when they cut to me, were hard and strange, like something was wearing my father's face. "Do it," he breathed, "just like we practiced, just like a deer." He turned back to the binoculars. The skiff sat in the damn shadow. From where the two men stood, we were a smear of darker dark against a patch of reeds. I swallowed, breath clouding. The scope lens fogged for a second, then cleared. I lined up on the man closest to us, the one with the blood on his cheek. He faced away, hunched, hands on his knees. The crosshairs jittered with each tremor of my arms. Behind me, the turbines hummed. Somewhere below, something massive shifted, making the hull bump lightly, like a fist from underneath. My father's big hand settled over mine on the stock. His thumb pressed against my trigger finger. "Hold your breath," he murmured. "Exhale slow through your nose. Just like a deer, Cass." Up on the concrete lip, the The man with the earrings, Lucas, stared back toward the black water. "Did you see what it did to Chad?" he hissed. His voice carried clearly in the cold air. "It fucking skinned him. I told you to stay away from this freak show, James. We have to find a road. We have to get the fuck out of here." My stomach twisted. Chad, Clemson's little girl. My brain jumped from word to word like it was crossing thin ice. James straightened a little, his back to us. His shoulders shook. I slid the crosshair under his left shoulder blade, the way Dad had taught me for deer. Just like a deer. Just like a deer. His grip tightened around my finger. The rifle barked. The recoil slammed into my shoulder hard enough to make me bite my tongue. The sound cracked across the water and bounced off the dam, doubled back on itself with a metallic ring. A puff of red mist bloomed where James's heart used to be. He pitched forward without a sound. For a second, his body hung on the edge of the concrete. Then it slid off into the water with a slap that sent ripples out toward us. A streak of dark spread under the surface, mixing with the faint glow of disturbed plankton. Lucas screamed. It wasn't a tough guy yell. It was a jagged, high sound like tearing metal. He spun, eyes huge, scanning the darkness. For a split second, his wild gaze passed right over us. He didn't see. We were just a shadow among shadows. "Good shot," the stranger wearing my father's face murmured. His mouth was near my ear. I could feel his breath, right through the pump. "I'm proud of you, Cassidy. Real proud." The words didn't fit with the body in the water or the taste of cordite and salt in my mouth. Lucas bolted. Instead of going back toward the outflow, he turned and ran along the narrow maintenance ledge toward the right, deeper into the maze of concrete ribs and ladders and railings that clung to the dam face. "Move," Dad said. He didn't wait for my legs to work. He shoved the rifle toward me, grabbed the side of the skiff, and pushed us out from behind the pilings, using to keep us silent. The boat answered with the lazy obedience of something that had done this 100 times. I sat there in shock for a few seconds, watching the bubbles where James had gone under. Something brushed the hull from below. Once, twice, not like normal driftwood, more deliberate. 3 slow knocks. Dad's hand snapped in front of my face, fingers clicking. "Cass," he hissed, eyes on me. "Your lead now. You're gonna track the other one. Show me you learned something all those weekends instead of just tanning on the bow." My throat felt like it was closing. I clutched the rifle to my chest. The scope pressed against my jacket and nodded. We coasted along the dam, staying in its shadow. The concrete wall rose above us, slick and weeping in places where tiny trickles of water bled through hairline cracks. It smelled like wet stone and algae and rust. Ahead, a set of metal rungs descended from a higher platform to a lower maintenance ledge not far above the waterline. A thin smear of something darker than moss streaked those rungs. "Blood. He's heading for the river stairs," I whispered. My voice sounded wrong in my own ears. Thin and far away. "There's a trail." "Then we follow," Dad said. Nice and easy. He brought the skiff alongside the base of the ladder. It creaked under his weight as he climbed, boots clanging softly. He tied the bow line off to a rusted ring, then leaned down to offer me a hand. My legs didn't want to work. I forced them to. My gloves squeaked on the cold, wet metal as I climbed up onto the ledge with the rifle slung and banging against my back. Up close, the dam hummed louder. I could feel it in my bones. The world up on that narrow strip of concrete was just water and wall and sky. The reservoir spread out behind us, flat and black. Somewhere out, there was the drowned creek where I'd learned to swim, the flooded foundations of old houses, a church steeple that only broke the surface at drought. "I just killed someone," I said, breath fogging. The words came out before I could stop them. "I just killed." Dad grabbed the front of my jacket and shook me once, hard enough to make my teeth click. "You shot a rabid animal," he said, eyes hot. "You remember what he and his friends did to that little girl. You remember that before you start crying for him." "I don't." "You do," he snapped. "You saw the bruises. You hurt her dad. You know what happened on that goddamn party boat? The sheriff had to ask her if she regretted flirting. They told Clemson his 13-year-old was asking for it because she wore a swimsuit. You remember that before you call what you did wrong. My stomach turned. Images blurred. Clemson's girl, sitting on our back steps a few weeks ago, wrapped in a blanket in July because she was shaking so hard. Her hair wet from the bay. The way she flinched when the pipes in our kitchen knocked. 3 boys from town with rich parents and slick boats. A river cruise. Too much booze. A blurred phone video that never made it past whisper and rumor because a certain councilman's son was in the frame. She said she didn't jump, I said. My voice shook. She said she woke up choking on water. She said someone was pushing her down. She said one of them laughed when she slipped. He replied, voice low and tight. She said one of them took pictures. You think that was Chad? Or Lucas? Or the piece of shit floating out there right now? He jerked his chin toward the spot where James had gone under. You think the law's gonna do a damn thing to them? He let go of my jacket. I swayed back, heels skidding a little on the slick surface. Eyes forward, he said. They're panicked. They'll leave a trail, even you can follow. Even in that moment, the dig stung. I almost snapped back at him. Instead, I sucked in a shaky breath and looked. Lucas had done exactly what I predicted. In his blind terror, he'd followed the maintenance ledge to where it stepped down closer to the waterline, then jumped to the lower lip and stumbled along it, leaving smears of blood and wet shoe prints. Beyond that, the dam curved into an older section where the base flared into a sort of apron, and a narrow spill of water trickled over green-stained concrete. The sound of running water grew louder as the sky to the east went gray-blue. Dawn wasn't far. We followed his path, feet silent except for the occasional squeak of rubber on algae. My thighs burned from the tension of keeping my balance. The drop to the water wasn't far, but that water was a churning, hungry black that would have pulled me under and into the intakes without noticing my scream. As we rounded a corner, the trickling sound resolved into a small side spill where the dam bled off a constant, controllable stream back into the river below. The flow fanned out in a white rush before smoothing into darker currents. On the far side of that spill, Lucas knelt at the edge, one hand pressed to his shoulder, the other braced on the concrete. Blood leaked between his fingers, mixing with the water. His breath came out in ragged sobs that echoed off the dam. He had no idea we were there. I dropped to a knee without thinking, the way I'd watched Dad do 100 times on the marsh bank. I braced my elbow on my thigh, cheek pressed to the stock, scope cool against my brow. Inhale, exhale, just like a deer. The crosshairs wobbled over his spine. I slid them down toward the center of his back. My finger rested on the trigger. This time, there was no surprise. I knew what would happen if I pulled it. I knew what his body would do. I knew what sound it would make hitting the surface. What are you waiting for? Dad whispered. He was a looming heat at my back. Do it. The hum of the dam drifted into a lower register. The concrete under my knee vibrated differently. Somewhere deep below, a gate shifted. The water spilling out changed tone. A long, slow knock reverberated through the wall. It sounded like something, tapping on the other side with a massive fist. Lucas flinched, head snapping toward us. For a fraction of a second, his eyes met mine through the scope. One was swollen, almost shut from whatever had happened to him down there. The other was bright with animal terror. He moved. I squeezed. The shot cracked, louder here in the tight space between wall and spill. Muzzle flash flared off wet concrete. The recoil drove into my shoulder again. This time I was braced for it, but it still hurt. The bullet hit him, but not where I'd intended. He twisted the last second. Instead of center mass, the round slammed into his upper arm and shoulder, spinning him like a rag doll. He went down on his side with a scream that scraped raw. Blood sprayed across the dam face in a fan before washing down toward the spill in thin rivulets. Fuck, Dad snarled. He sprang forward, boots slipping a little on the algae-slick concrete. Lucas, wounded, clawed at the ground with his good hand, dragging himself toward the spill stream like he might throw himself into it and let the river take him rather than whatever was behind him. Dad reached him first. He grabbed Lucas by the ankles and yanked him back from the edge, away from the water that churned hungrily a foot away. Lucas's body scraped over the wet concrete, leaving pink streaks. "What?" Lucas coughed, spitting blood and broken teeth into the spill. "Why are you doing this?" Dad flipped him onto his back with a rough shove. Up close, the kid, because that's what he was, really barely older than me, looked like he'd gone 12 rounds with a storm. His nose was crooked and leaking, his lips split, one eye purpled. His hoodie had a dark, spreading bloom where the bullet had gone in. "You know why?" Dad snarled, leaning down so his face was inches from Lucas's. "You know exactly why. What you and your buddies did to that girl." Lucas choked, then coughed. "She was into it. She asked us to." Dad punched him in the mouth. The sound was wet and dull. Lucas's head snapped sideways. Blood arced out, pattering across the concrete and dripping into the spill with little pink threads. "She was 13, Dad said through clenched teeth. Spit flew. 13, you sick fucking fuck. 13. He hit him again. And again. Each impact sent a little shudder through the dam under my feet. The rifle felt heavier and heavier in my hands until I had to shift my grip to keep from dropping it. My vision blurred. I realized I was crying. Hot tracks down frozen cheeks. The smell of blood and river water and Dad's sweat mixed into something I'll never get out of my nose. Lucas stopped trying to shield his face. His arms flopped at his sides, the wounded one twitching. Dad's fist slowed. He was breathing hard now, more from the rage than the exertion. He stayed crouched there, muscles trembling, staring down at the broken mess of a boy in front of him. Lucas's one good eye rolled toward me. It struggled to focus. "Why?" he croaked again. His voice sounded smaller. "Human. Please. Please, I'll go. You'll never see me again. My parents, they have money. I can pay you, okay? Whatever you want. Just don't." His gaze flicked past me for a second toward the water. His face crumpled in a way that had nothing to do with Dad's fists. "You saw it too," he whispered. His lips were swelling, words slipping around them. "Down there, in the dark. You saw what it did to Chad. It ain't gonna stop. You think killing me changes that?" My skin crawled. The hum of the dam dipped again, then rose. Another knock came, distant but real. Once, twice, 3 times. It vibrated up through my boots into my bones. Dad's eyes flicked to the wall, just for a heartbeat. His jaw tightened. Then he stood up, turned to me, and held out his hand. The gesture was so familiar, it snapped me back through time. Him holding out a spear gun to me on a sandbar, water dripping off his elbow. Him passing me the wheel when I was 10 and could barely see over it. Him sliding a frozen fish stick onto my plate when I was 6. "Finish it," he said. My voice broke. "Dad, I can't. I already." "Finish it," he repeated. "You get a fish, you make sure it's dead. You shoot a deer, you don't leave it crawling around in the brush suffering. You don't give people like this the chance to hurt anyone else. Ever again. You wanted to grow up so bad? Congratulations. This is what grown up looks like." My hand shook as I pulled the bolt back. The spent casing flew, tink-tink-tinking across the concrete before rolling into the spill and vanishing. I slid another round into the chamber with a click that sounded way too loud. Lucas made a small, broken noise in his throat. Dad stepped back, giving me space. His face was stone. Only his eyes moved, tracking me as I walked closer to the boy on the ground. He stank of iron and river mud and cheap cologne. His breath wheezed in and out. His lips moved soundlessly for a second, like he was praying. Just like a deer, I thought. The words felt like someone else had shoved them into my skull. Just like a deer. I raised the rifle. The barrel wobbled until I gritted my teeth and forced my arms to steady. I breathed in, held, breathed out through my nose. The dam knocked again. Slow, patient. 3 times, in a rhythm I knew I'd hear in my sleep for the rest of my life. I put the sights on his forehead. His one good, I locked on mine. "Please," he whispered. I pulled the trigger. The shot rang around inside my skull longer than it did off the concrete. For a heartbeat after I pulled the trigger, nothing moved. It was like the whole dam held its breath with me. Then the back of his head let go. It wasn't like in movies. No slow collapse. No poetic fall. His body jerked, then just stopped. The light went out of his good eye so fast, it was like someone flicked a switch. Blood burst out under his hair and slid down over the edge of the spill in a thick sheet. It hit the water below with a sound that's never left me. Not a splash, more like wet fabric being ripped underwater. I think I made noise. I don't know. My ears were roaring. I smelled hot metal and cordite and river rot. My hands went numb, and for a second I thought I'd dropped the rifle until I realized my fingers were locked so hard around it that my knuckles hurt. Dad stepped around Lucas's body like it was a net on the deck. He put his hand over the muzzle and pushed it down. Gently this time, the same way he'd push a barrel down if some new recruit swung it too close to someone on the pier. "Breathe," he said. The world slid sideways. My knees hit the concrete. I tore the vest buckle open and leaned over the spill, vomiting so hard my ribs seized. It felt like my insides were trying to crawl out. Sour hot chocolate, bile, and snot burned my throat. Below, my puke hit the white water and vanished. The river ate everything. I felt his hand on my back, heavy and steady. "You did good," he said. I wanted to scream at him, to shove him into the spill and hold him under until the dam pumped him dry. Instead, my jaw just trembled and my teeth clicked together so hard they hurt. "I killed him," I managed between spasms. My voice sounded thin, younger than 16. "I killed him. I'm a fucking..." "You're what?" He cut in. "A murderer?" His fingers tightened on my wetsuit. "You think he wasn't already one? You think Chad's not dead if he didn't pull that trigger? You think Clemson's girl's nightmares just go away because the sheriff loses some statements?" He crouched down next to me, so we were eye level, his breath misting between us. "Look at me, Cass." I didn't want to. I did anyway. His face was streaked with grime and someone else's blood. The cut at his hairline had reopened. A thin thread of red crawled down the side of his face and froze at his jaw where the cold hit it. "This doesn't feel clean," he said. "It never does. It's not supposed to. You hang on to that feeling. That's what keeps you from turning into them. But don't you ever call yourself worse than they are for putting them somewhere they can't hurt anybody else." I saw his face, I whispered. He was just some shitty kid, like one of the guys at the marina. Yeah, and if Clemson's girl didn't fight like hell, if she didn't slip and hit her head just right so she stopped moving, he'd still be drunk and laughing on the river right now, looking for the next girl dumb enough to think his boat meant safety. He stood up. The dam hummed under us. The spill's white noise filled the spaces between his words. "Get up," he said. "We're not done." I wiped my mouth on my sleeve and pushed myself up. My legs felt like somebody else's. "What now?" My voice scraped. "Now we clean up." He crouched by Lucas's body and went through his pockets quick and clinical, never lingering. Wallet, keys, phone. He flicked the phone on. The cracked screen lit his bloody fingers. "Battery's dead," he muttered. "Figures." He tossed the phone into the spill. It hit the surface, sparked once in the white water, then disappeared. "Grab his other arm," he said. "What?" He glared over his shoulder. "We didn't bring a winch, Cass. I'm not dragging 2 dead weights by myself." Hands under his wrist, not the sleeve. "You want to keep some of that skin on you forever." The image almost buckled me again. I swallowed it and moved. His skin was still warm. That fucked me up more than anything. Warm and slick and human. Muscles slack. When I hauled on his wrist, his head lolled to the side with a soft clack of teeth. "On 3, Dad said. 1, 2. We heaved. The body slid toward the edge, leaving a darker smear where the blood mixed with water seeping out of the concrete pores. "Wait," I blurted. He stared at me. The rumble of the turbines filled the space where his voice should have been. "What?" he asked, finally clipped. "What about?" "Chad." I pointed dumbly toward the outflows, toward the black, gaping mouths in the dam. What about the thing he was talking about? That monster? For the first time since he'd opened my bedroom door, something like doubt flickered in his eyes. He glanced out across the spill, toward the central intake where the water welled and boiled up from underneath, splitting around some unseen obstruction before smoothing out again. The hum of the dam shifted, dropping low enough that I felt it in my teeth. Then came a knocks. 3 of them. Slow. Huge. Not an echo, not a loose pipe. It was like the whole wall behind us was a drum, and something on the other side had just tapped its fingers along it. My bones vibrated. The concrete under my boots answered with a faint tremor. Dad's throat worked. He looked down into the spill. The water there didn't look like normal water. The white stream fell into it, disappeared, and in that place where it should have frothed, it thickened, turned darker, like something with the skin stretched tight over it held underneath. "You want to know what that was?" he asked quietly. Yes, I lied. "No, you don't," he said. "You just got to know it's hungry." He flicked his gaze back to me. "And people like this?" He glanced at Lucas. "They're the only thing in this world I don't mind feeding it." His words felt like ice water poured down my spine. He jerked his chin at the spill. "On 3, Cass. Quit hesitating. We don't have time." We heaved again. This time I didn't stop him. Lucas's body tipped over the edge. For a weird moment, he seemed to hang there, arms flopping limply, as if he might sit back up. Then gravity took him. He dropped into the spill with all the grace of a sack of wet sand. Water exploded up around him. One of his shoes came off and spun away. Blood unfurled into the current like smoke. The river reached up and took him. For just a second, before he vanished into the darker water below, something pale moved up from under him. A bulge pressed against the surface from beneath, distorting his limp shape. Too big, too smooth, like a huge, blind head without a face. Then the surface broke. I didn't see the whole thing. I saw a curve of slick, gray and white flesh, marbled like scar tissue. I saw a line of something that might have been tiny suckers or might have been teeth, ringed in an almost fluorescent blue. I saw his body jerk as if a giant hand grabbed him from below. It pulled him under so fast he left a vacuum behind. The spilled water snapped down to fill it, slapping against the concrete with a crack that echoed off the dam. My heart stopped. For a second, I swear it did. Dad grabbed my arm when I staggered. "Don't look into it too long," he said hoarsely. "You let it look back at you, and you'll never leave." "You said," my teeth chattered. I wasn't sure if it was from the cold anymore. "You said it wasn't real. That the shit from your boat was... You always said it was just bad dreams." He laughed once. It wasn't happy. I said that when you were 8, Cass. "The knocks," I said. My eyes burned, trying to take in the water and him and the wall all at once. "On the hull. The ones you talked about from over there. The thing that followed you up from whatever trench you were hiding in. This is it, isn't it?" The dam hummed. The water smoothed over. The pale, swelling shape below sank back down, or maybe it just folded itself into the black and waited. "You don't say its name?" he said. "You don't even think where we met it. You hear me?" "What?" My voice cracked. "It's just water." He squeezed my arm hard enough to bruise. Nothing that knocks on the wrong side is ever just whatever it looks like. He let me go and moved to where James had gone over the edge near the outflow. A few scraps of fabric clung to some exposed rebar just above the waterline. Pieces of hoodie, maybe. There were darker streaks on the concrete, but the dam was already drinking them down. The river never kept evidence for long. "We gotta go," he said. "Was not gonna sit on that slip all morning without drawing eyes." How are we going to explain any of this? I gestured helplessly to the dam, the spill, the absence of bodies that used to be people. "We're not," he said. "Bodies go missing on rivers all the damn time. Cars slide off roads. Kids get drunk and decide to jump from dams. The water does the lying for us." He started back along the maintenance ledge. I followed because there was nothing else to do. We retraced our steps past the trickle of seepage lines, past the rusted ladder we'd climbed up. My boots slipped once on a patch of slime, and my heart jumped into my throat. The skiff waited below, tucked in the damn shadow. The river's surface around it was dotted with little phosphorescent sparks where our movements had stirred up plankton. As we climbed down, something knocked against the hull. Once, twice, 3 times, the same slow rhythm as the wall. "Get in," he said, "and don't lean over the side." I obeyed faster than I'd moved all night. He untied the bow line with fumbling fingers and shoved us off with a hard push against the concrete. The hull rocked, then righted. The outboard sputtered when he yanked the cord, then caught. We pulled away from the dam. I finally let myself look back. In the gray light of early morning, the massive concrete breast of it looked normal. Just a piece of infrastructure. Just a dam holding back a man-made lake. The outflows gaped like usual. The spill we'd stood over was a thin scar of white. Nobody would ever believe what I saw there. "Dad," I said. "Yeah." "Does Mom know?" His shoulders hunched under his hoodie. "She knows enough to hate this place." "You brought it home," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. "Whatever you met down there, under whatever ocean the Navy stuck you in, you brought it back. To our fucking river. To Clemson's girl. To... Enough." His voice cracked like a gunshot. The outboard droned. Cold air knifed through the gap in my jacket where my vomit had soaked it. My fingers stung as feelings started to come back. We slid under the bridge just as the first hint of real dawn painted the sky. Somewhere upriver, a semi's engine growled on the highway. Downriver, near a bend hidden by trees, a little side channel cut off from the main flow formed a half-forgotten slip with a county moored old barges and where, if you knew your way around, you could tie off unseen. Will's truck sat crooked on the shore, back down onto a patch of mud. His silhouette hunched near the end of the little dock, hands stuffed into the pockets of a faded jacket. Cigarette ember bright in the growing light. When he heard our engine, he flicked the cigarette into the river and ground his heel on the boards as if that did anything. "You're late," he said when we came alongside. His eyes tracked us over the water, noting the blood on Dad's hoodie, the way my hands shook on the gunnel. "Things got complicated," Dad replied. He tossed him the ammo box and binoculars. "You get the car taken care of?" Will caught the box one-handed. His fingers were scarred and shiny in places, burn marks from some engine compartment mishap years back. "Yeah," he said, pushed it off the old ferry ramp. Current took it right to the channel like we figured. He jerked his chin toward the bend. "If they ever find it, it's going to look like 3 drunk assholes drove where they weren't supposed to. Keys are in the ignition. Phone's gone. Wallet's too." "Good." Dad nodded once. Will peered closer in my face, frowning. "Hey, sunshine," he said. "You hold it together?" "She did fine," Dad snapped. I glared at him. "I'm right here." Will lifted his hands. "Saw the... You did good, kid." He hesitated, then dropped his voice. "You see anything down there?" He didn't mean the boys. Dad shot him a look, a whole conversation in one glance. Later, Will's jaw tightened. He nodded and stepped back, letting us tie off. We loaded the rifle and vested into the truck bed under a tarp that already smelled like fish and gas. We did everything we were supposed to do. We wiped down what we'd touched. We didn't look each other in the eye longer than a second at a time. The finished script of someone else's bad idea. By the time Dad and I got back to our little house on the bay, the sun sat low and pale over the harbor, and the wind had picked up enough to put white caps on the water. Our house groaned with each gust. Mom stood on the dock when we pulled in. Her robe flapped around her legs. The breeze tried to snatch her hair out of her face. She had a mug between her hands, but I could tell from the tightness in her jaw she hadn't drunk anything from it. "Hey, Shelb," Dad called, stepping off the skiff with a tired grin like this was any other dawn run. We got skunked. Old bastard must have heard we were coming. She didn't smile back. Her eyes went to the rust-brown smear on the side of his hoodie, to the stiff way I climbed onto the dock, to how I flinched when the skiff bumped the pilings. "What did you do?" she asked Nathan. Not question. A sentence with a question mark tacked on out of habit. Dad's shoulders dropped a fraction. "We talked about this," he said. "We weren't going to. I asked what you did." Her voice rose. Somewhere behind us on the water, a buoy bell clanged. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at me. Mom's gaze followed his, locked onto me like a searchlight. I tried to come up with something. A lie, a joke, some bullshit about almost falling in and getting scared. Nothing came. The damn knocked in my head. "I shot somebody," I heard myself say. The mug slid from her fingers and shattered on the dock. Coffee splashed her bare feet. Her face crumpled for a second, like somebody squeezed her heart in their fist. Then she pulled herself back together with a visible effort, shoulders straightening. "Inside," she said. "Now." The kitchen smelled like coffee and salt and the bleach she used on the counters. The pipes in the walls clanged as the neighbor's shower kicked on, sending little shivers through the floor. She stood at the sink, hands braced on the counter. Dad leaned against the door jamb like he owned it. I sat at the table where I'd done homework and doodled waves in the margins. "Nate," she said, not looking at him, "tell me you didn't take my daughter up there to that place. Tell me you didn't bring her into that." I wasn't going to leave her in this house wondering why I went to jail, he shot back. "You want her hearing about Clemson's girl from Gossip on the Dock? You want those boys driving by our house laughing while she's trying to sleep?" "No," she said. "I want the law to do its job. It can't." He stepped closer. "You know it. I know it. You saw whose kid was on that boat. You saw how fast the sheriff started talking about mixed signals and regrettable misunderstandings once the councilman called. So your answer is to play judge and jury." She spun around, eyes bright. "You and Will and whatever else came back with you from the fucking ocean?" He flinched like she'd slapped him. "Sheb," he said quietly, "lower your voice. Don't you lower your voice, me." She jabbed a finger toward the bay through the window. "You think I didn't hear it? Every time your boat tied up after you rotated home, those knocks through the hull, I'd be doing dishes, and the pipes would rattle in that same rhythm. And you'd come up the dock looking like you were hearing something only you could hear." She turned to me. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. "At the dam." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. "Saw what?" "The thing your father pretends is just a bad dream," she said. "He met it under some foreign sea and then drag it back here like everything else he can't put down. Did you see it?" I thought of the pale bulge surfacing under Lucas, the ring of blue knot eyes, the way the water had thickened around it. "I saw something," I said. "I don't know what it was." Her lips thinned. "You brought it into our river," she said to Dad. "Into our goddamn drinking water." "It was already here," he said. "Places like this, it likes them. Deep water, strong currents, things getting chewed up in the dark where nobody looks too close. You think it wouldn't find its way into those intakes without me? At least this way we pick who it gets." "That's not ours to decide," she said. "Clemson's girl didn't get a say," he shot back. "Those boys did. They chose. I'm just making sure the math adds up." They stared at each other over the sink like two storms colliding. Finally, she looked away, shoulders sagging. "You put our daughter between you and it," she said. "That's what you did. Just like you put those kids between you and whatever you heard in that black water overseas. You don't come home. You bring the ocean back instead and dump it on our kitchen floor." His face did something then. I hadn't seen that expression on him before. It was like guilt and anger and helplessness all fighting to get out at once. "I'm trying to protect her," he said. "By handing her a rifle," she snapped. "By painting crosshairs over some idiot's back instead of letting her be 16. They went at it like that for what felt like hours. Every argument they'd swallowed during deployments and bills and missed birthdays spilled out, all of it anchored to the same black center where the dam sat humming and the thing behind it knocked and waited. At some point, I slipped out the back door onto the tiny deck that hung over the water. The tide had come in. The pilings were slick and black below. Little waves slapped the barnacles. I sat there with my knees pulled up, watching the harbor breathe. Under the deck, something tapped on the pilings. Once, twice, 3 times. I stared down into the gap between our house and the neighbors, where the water pooled deeper. Nothing moved, just the faint swirl of current. "Stop it," I whispered. The knocking stopped. I wish I could say that was the last time. It wasn't. Dad didn't go back to the Navy after that. He said he was done crawling through steel tubes, done surfacing in strange ports that all smelled like diesel and too much salt. For a while he worked on tugs in the harbor. Then some company contracted him to consult at the dam. "Hydro's the future, Cass," he said, grinning like he believed it. "Clean energy, good money. I know how that structure breathes better than half the engineers on their computers." He started spending more and more time upriver. Some nights, he wouldn't be home when I went to bed. I'd hear the skiff coming under the house in the small hours, his boots on the dock, the sink running as he washed something down the drain. Mom pretended not to notice, or she noticed and filed it away in some box inside her chest labeled later. They barely spoke those days except in logistics. Meanwhile, the story about the boys leaked out in exactly the broken way Dad said it would. People at the marina whispered about a sedan found deep in the channel weeks after it went missing. No bodies inside. The papers ran a tiny story about 3 local young men presumed drowned. Heavy hearts, prayers for the families. Clemson's girl didn't go to the memorial. When I walked past her at the bait shop one day, she wouldn't look at me. I don't know if it was because she knew what I'd done, or because she was trying not to see any part of that night reflected in anybody's eyes. Water carries secrets, but it never loses weight. It just moves it around. I started spending more time under the surface. It was the only place that made sense. Up top, everything was noise and rumor. Down below, the rules were simple. You breathed when the regulators gave you air. You didn't if they didn't. You watched your depth and your time. You paid attention to pressure. If you screwed up, you got bent or you drowned. Black and white. In a place that carried every shade of gray. Dad trained me hard. Freediving first. Learning how to quiet the mind. How to control the urge to breathe. How to equalize. He drilled me on currents and thermoclines and how to feel your way along a structure with your fingertips when you couldn't see your hand in front of your mask. "Steel talks underwater," he said once, when we were below the marina barge, listening to the whole creak and groan with the tide. You learn to listen to it. You can tell when something's wrong before it cracks. He never mentioned the knocks again. Not out loud. I joined the volunteer rescue dive team as soon as they'd take me. At 18, I was the youngest one they'd ever certified. Sometimes that meant I stayed topside, logging dives and translating sheriff's barked orders for the older guys who couldn't work a tablet. Sometimes it meant I went down. Bodies in cars, hunters who fell out of their boats, kids who thought they could swim across a channel and misjudged the current. The dam took more than its share. Every time we got called upriver, Dad found a reason to be there too. Consulting, or already on site for maintenance, or just happening to be working that day. He was never far from that concrete wall anymore. The last dive we did together was 2 years ago. It was late fall. The air had that wet chill again. The reservoir was low from a dry summer, so more of the old drowned world showed through. You could see the tops of trees that had been woodland before the valley flooded, now black skeletons reaching up out of the water. Bits of old fence line, the tip of a church steeple if you squinted. We'd barely finished dinner when his work radio crackled from the office. "Control to Nathan, we got a jam on intake 3 again," some bored voice said. Trash racks reading blocked at 60%. "You near the site?" Dad shot me a look over the table. "You'll be fine?" he asked Mom. She didn't answer. He swallowed. "I'll go check it out," he said into the radio. "If it's minor, I'll clear it. If it's major, you owe me overtime." "You know we don't do overtime," the voice joked weakly. He turned to me. "You coming?" Mom's head snapped up. "No," she said. "She's certified," he replied. "She's done worse. It's a rack clear, not a salvage." "It's dark," she said, "and it's that place." He hesitated, looked at me. I looked at my plate, at the condensation on the water glass, at the tiny ripple in the surface when the fridge kicked on and the whole house vibrated the slightest bit. "I can handle it," I said. Mom's chair scraped back hard enough to leave a mark on the floor. "You two are going to do what you want anyway," she said. "So don't bother asking me anymore. Just don't bring anything back here I can't mop up." She walked out onto the deck and slid the door shut behind her, leaving us with the clink of masts and the smell of the bay. We didn't talk much on the drive upriver. The dam loomed out of the dark like always, lights throwing long reflections over the water. Fog hugged the surface. The turbines hummed like distant thunder. We geared up on the maintenance platform. Dry suits, hoods, gloves, double tanks, full face masks with comm units so we could talk. I checked my SPG, my regulators, my valves. The ritual calmed me. Numbers don't lie. Pressure is pressure. Depth's only going to be about 40 at the rack, Dad said, voice tinny in my ear as the hood sealed it in. But the current's going to push you. You feel yourself getting dragged. You let go. Don't fight it. You're not stronger than that intake. "Copy," I said. The water lapped black against the concrete a few feet below. The spotlights along the dam made it look like oil. "Ready?" he asked. "No," I said. "Let's go." We stepped off the platform together. The impact stole my breath for a second, as it always did, no matter how many entries I did. The cold punched through the suit like a thing with hands. Bubbles roared around my head, then faded as we sank. The surface light smeared above, then shrank. We descended along the dam face, hands on the concrete, following the line of a safety cable down. The wall wept here and there. Tiny streams of seepage trailed past in curtains, oddly warm where they touched my gloves. My depth gauge ticked down. 10 feet. 15. 25. My ears popped and then equalized. The hum of the turbines grew louder, a giant's heartbeat in the water. At about 30 feet, my light hit the trash rack. It rose from the bottom like a metal fence, bars thick and close together, angling away from the intake so big debris couldn't get sucked straight in. Candy wrappers and branches clung to it, fluttering in the current. And something else. "See that?" Dad's voice crackled. "Yeah," I said. Something pale and fibrous was wrapped around the middle section of the rack, jammed between the bars. At first, I thought it was a plastic tarp. Then my beam slid over it and hit exposed bone. It was a deer, or what was left of one. Rib cage flared, spine twisted, head hanging at an unnatural angle. The flesh had been flayed in long, even strips. Not chewed, peeled. The current pressed it against the bars, making the stripped fibers ripple like kelp. "Jesus," I whispered. That natural? Sometimes they get too close," Dad said. His voice was too tight to pass for casual. "Slip on the bank. Get pulled in. The pressure does that." We both knew water tears flesh differently than teeth. But this was clean, surgical in places. "I swallowed bile." "Plan?" I asked, clinging to training. "We clear it," he said. "You take the lower half. I'll saw the ribs and pull the top. We don't need more suction building behind this thing." "Roger." "Roger." I move along the rack, fingers finding purchase on the slimy metal. The current tugged at me, steady and insistent. You don't fight it. You angle into it and let your fins and free hand keep you where you want to be. I drew my knife and started sawing through the connective tissue near the spine. The flesh came away in rubbery strips, pale and veined. It reminded me of something, but I shoved the thought away. Above me, Dad's light bobbed as he worked. "This remind you of anything?" he asked quietly. "Don't." My voice came out sharp. Silence for a moment, but for the rush of water past our ears. Then knock. It reverberated through my hand on the rack, through the knife handle, through the water itself. The first one was faint. I almost wrote it off as my tank hitting something. The second came slower, louder. It wasn't from behind us, where the dam wall was. It was from beyond the rack, deeper inside the intake. 3. My heart tripped. The knife slipped to my glove. "You feel that?" I asked. "Yeah," Dad said. His light froze. The knocks came again, this time in a different rhythm. Closer. It was like something huge was testing the bars from the other side with one big finger. "Top." Pause. Top, top. The current pulsed, pushing the deer carcass harder against the metal. For a second, underneath the normal roar, I heard something like breath, slow and wet. I'm done, I said. My voice rose. We should abort. Rack's maybe 40% clear. That's enough. Let the system handle the rest. If that pressure builds more, we're going to have a bigger problem than some noise, he replied. You can go up if you want. I'll finish. Fuck you, I snapped. We don't split in low vis with an unknown in front of us. You taught me that. He was quiet for a second. Cass, he said softer. You hear it too, don't you? The touch of it started at my fingertips. A prickle, almost like when you grab a running electrical cord with wet hands. It crawled up my arms, under the suit, into my shoulders. The water in front of the rack shimmered. That's the only word I have. Like heat wobble on asphalt, but black and underwater and wrong. Behind the bars, where my light couldn't quite penetrate, something vast shifted. Not toward us or away. Just turned, like it was finally facing the right direction. It knocked again. This time the rhythm wasn't random. 3 slow taps. Pause. 3. Pause. 3. My memory filled in the rest. The hole under my childhood bedroom. The pilings under our house. The spill wall at the dam. The concrete under my boots when Lucas begged. My breathing sped up. I watched my bubbles rush upward and flatten my panic as best I could. It wants more, Dad said. I twisted to look at him. In the glow of his mask lights, his eyes looked older than I'd ever seen them. Not scared exactly. Resigned, like someone who'd been trying to hold the tide back with their hands and finally realized the ocean always wins. You've been feeding it, I said. He flinched at the accusation in my voice. Even underwater, I could see it. Not all the time, he said quickly. Not everyone casts. Just the ones who aren't going to get what they deserve up top. Places like this, things get stuck. Trash logs bodies. The system breaks if someone doesn't clear it. I just steer. My stomach turned. That deer isn't a rapist. It is to the farmers, he replied. To the people whose cars it's wrecked. To the families that hit it and went off the road. He gestured with a knife. You think it cares what kind of meat it gets? That's your justification? I said, you turned a goddamn intake gremlin into your personal hitman, and now it's asking for seconds. The water pressed harder. My hand slipped off the bar. I grabbed it again. The rack creaked. It was already here, he said again, desperate. You don't understand. We heard on sonar overseas before anybody saw the blip. Some black shape on the screen nobody had a name for. It followed our boat instead of the other way around. When we came back to port, it came too. We rotated out, it stayed. Why didn't you tell someone? I demanded. Command. Scientists. Fucking Coast Guard. Anybody. Who? He laughed, short and sharp. You know what happens to sailors who come back talking about monsters hitting their hull? They get benched. They get psych evals. They get pills. And ships keep disappearing in quiet ways. Another knock, sharper. The deer carcass jerked on the bars, as if something beyond had tugged it. You can't keep doing this, I said. Whatever deal you think you made, it's only in your head. It's not your job to balance the scales. It is, he said, because apparently nobody else is going to. And you helped, whether you like it or not. He kicked down, braced his boots on the bottom, and started sawing through the deer spine with vicious strokes. I stared at him, at the pale flesh fluttering in the current, at the black beyond the bars. And I made a choice. I'm going up, I said. Now, Cassidy, I'm not dying down here so your pet can keep snacking, I snapped. You want to feed it, you feed it. But don't ever put me in front of it again. Not as bait, not as hunter, not as anything. I let go of the rack and kicked upward. The current fought me for a second, then let go, like a hand reluctantly releasing a sleeve. Depth gauge climbing. 30, 20, 15. The water lightened from ink to dark green. Cass, Dad's voice chased me. Get back down here. I kill my light. For a moment, I hovered in shadow, the faint glow from above blurring the outline of the dam. Below, his light bobbed like a lone star. The knocks came again, furious now. The rack screeched. For a heartbeat, my stupid brain pictured it tearing free. The whole river rushing in, taking him, the structure, everything. "You come up," I said, forcing my voice calm. "Now, or I swear to God, I'm cutting your air." Silence on the line, then a sigh that fuzzed with static. "Go," he said. "I'll be right behind you." I didn't hesitate. The surface rushed closer. I broke through in a burst of bubbles and noise. The cold air slapped my exposed mask. Spotlights from the dam stabbed down, making everything too bright. I rolled onto my back and kicked toward the platform, peeling the regulator from my mouth. My breath steamed. A couple of plant guys stood near the railing, silhouettes against the glow of the control room windows. "You good?" one of them called. "What's it look like down there?" "Deer on the rack." I called back, voice more steady than I felt. "He's clearing it. Give him a minute." They nodded, satisfied. One made some joke about venison stew I didn't catch. I stripped my fins and hauled myself up the ladder, boots squelching. The concrete under my hands felt too solid, too real. Part of me wanted to jump back and just to prove I could, that the water wasn't what had the power. I waited. A minute. Two. I stared at the patch of black where we'd gone in, expecting my dad's head to break the surface any second. He'd push his mask up, crack some awful joke, make me feel stupid for worrying. The water stayed flat. "Come on," I muttered. "Quit being dramatic." 3 slow knocks rattled the bolts in the platform. Everyone felt it. The plant guys looked down at their feet, then at each other, half nervous smile, half, "Is that usual?" "Old structure," one said. "She complains." No bubbles broke the surface. "Hey," I shouted, panic sharpening my voice. "Dad, you're done, let's go." The comm on my hood crackled. For a second, I thought I heard breathing. Not his. Something heavier. "Vet, come on," I said again, too low for anyone else to hear. Silence. The hum of the turbines climbed, the pitch higher, almost excited. The plant supervisor, a woman with crow's feet and a clipboard, stepped closer. "Something wrong?" she asked. I stared at the water, at the spot where his light should have been. He said he was cutting the rack. I stammered. "You should be up by now. It's not that deep." Her face shifted. Professional. Controlled. "Get a line," she told one of the guys. "Now, you." She pointed at me. "You got gas left?" "Yes," I lied. "Get back down there," she said. "Find him. If he's trapped, we need to know before we start shutting anything off." The idea of going back and made my skin crawl. But if he was alive, I shoved the reg back in my mouth, yanked my fins on with trembling hands, and dropped. The water swallowed me again. My light carved a cone through the murk. The rack loomed up, silver and black. The deer carcass was gone. Cleanly. Not even a scrap of skin. The bars were bare. The water in front of them wavered. "Dad," I said into the comm, "where are you?" Static. A hiss. Then, faintly, 3 knocks in my ears. They weren't from the dam this time. They were inside the line. "Fuck this," I breathed. Movement to my left. I swung my light. His knife floated a foot off the bottom, caught on a current, blade flashing. His tether line hung limp, trailing into nothing. No cut, no break, just gone. No vabis. The pressure in the water changed. My suit squeezed my shoulders. It felt like someone had stepped into an elevator with me. Something pressed against the other side of the rack. Not a face, not anything that neat. Just a bulge of darkness pushing against the bars, making them bow inward a fraction. The metal groaned. Tiny flakes of rust spiraled away. In the center of that bulge, a pale, ragged shape rotated slowly. For a heartbeat, it lined up with my light. Dog tags. 2 of them tangled together. One chain snapped and fused into the other with some dark, organic mass. They flipped and flashed. I saw letters. Nath. Then the whole mass rolled, tags and all, and melted back into the black beyond. "Dad," I said. It came out like a sob through the reg. The thing behind the rack knocked, once, right where his tags had been, close enough that I could feel it in my fillings. I kicked backward without thinking. My fin clipped the rack. Pain shot up my leg through the plastic. The current grabbed me like a hand. It tugged me toward the bars, toward that wrong, wobbling patch. Nathan, respond. The supervisor's voice cut in, tinny with distance. Cass, you got eyes on him? I couldn't answer without screaming. My brain flicked through every training scenario I'd ever done. Entanglement, equipment failure, lost diver. Not once have we practiced parent swallowed by something the engineers don't have a word for. I grabbed a support strut on the rack and yanked myself sideways out of the main pull. My gloves squeaked on slime. My heart pounded so hard my vision narrowed. Abort, I finally forced out. He's not here. His line's gone. The rack's clear. Something else. I stopped. I need to get out. Now. I expected pushback. Questions. Accusations. Instead, there was a pause. Then the supervisor's voice came back flat. Surface, she said. We'll handle it topside. I didn't need telling twice. I don't remember climbing the ladder. I don't remember stripping my gear. I remember standing on that platform in my soaked underlayer, shivering so hard my teeth clicked, watching the water. They shut down intake 3 that night. Officially, the report said mechanical failure. Unofficially, nobody wanted to go near that rack again. They called the search after 24 hours. No amount of sonar, hooks, or remote cameras turned up so much as a glove. They dragged the river below, checking eddies and snags. Nothing. The dam, they said, took him. The company put up a plaque. The sheriff said nice words. Old Navy buddies came into town and drank too much on the barge and told stories about him that made me laugh until I couldn't breathe from the hurt. Mom didn't say I told you so. She went quiet in a way that scared me more than any yelling could have. The knocks didn't stop. If anything, they picked up under the house. 3 slow taps on the pilings when the tide changed. In the pipes, right before the water sputtered on. Against the hull of any boat I stepped on. Like someone rapping hello from a depth where no hand should reach. I quit the rescue team. I couldn't keep dragging strangers out of the water when I couldn't even get my father back. Every body I saw in a bag reminded me of empty tags spinning in black. I tried to stay away from the dam, from the river, from deep water. It didn't matter. Every harbor is just the mouth of something bigger. The year after he went missing, a company building an underwater data cable in the bay hired divers. Good money, clean work, compared to hauling bloated corpses off stumps. I told myself it was just a job, that I could be near the water without going under in ways that mattered. They put us up in a prefab module on a barge out past the mouth of the bay. A little floating tin can full of bunks, damp towels, and the constant hum of generators. At night, the ocean stretched black in all directions, and the lights from town were just a smear on the horizon. I told the project lead I prefer dry work. He laughed. You got dive certs, you're going under. That's how we make money, kid. So I suited up again. This wasn't the river. This was open water. Different rules. Currents that came from storms 1,000 miles away, not from some concrete throat. But pressurized steel is pressurized steel. A hull is a hull. And things that learn how to knock don't forget. We were laying cable along the bottom, like stitching across the seafloor. Our job was to check for snags, make sure the cable bedded into the trench right, clear rocks and debris the dredge missed. It was routine, boring mostly. Swim along the line, beam on the cable, report any anomalies. The worst thing we saw the first few days was a dead turtle caught on a section of scrap netting. The night it happened, the water was unusually still. We got in a forecast of heavy swell for the next day, so the supervisor wanted to get as much done beforehand as possible. That meant night dives. There's a special kind of quiet that comes with being underwater in the dark, with only the circle of your light and the tap of your own bubbles for company. It's almost peaceful, until it isn't. I went down with another diver, Rami. We were clipped together with a buddy line, a piece of rope between our harnesses in case visibility dropped. Creepy as shit, he said over the comm as we descended, his accent making shit sound almost polite. Feels like being inside a closed eye. Who says things like that on the way down? I replied. You trying to jinx us? He chuckled. Superstitious Americans. We hit bottom at about 60 feet. Sand. A few scattered rocks. The cable lay in its shallow trench like a fat, black snake. We started our sweep. 10 minutes in, my shoulders loosened. Work was work. The routine smoothed edges off the panic that still lived under my skin. We followed the line along a gentle slope. My gauge ticked 65 feet, 70. The beam of my light picked out shrimp flicking away, little clouds of disturbed sand. Cable's good here, I reported. Copy, the supervisor said in my ear. Keep going another 100 meters, then swing back. Roger. We finned along. About 80 meters out, the cable dipped into a natural depression, something like a shallow ditch carved in the seafloor. Rocks had rolled in from one side, and some twisted piece of metal, maybe old anchor chain, had gotten half buried across it. Snag ahead, I said. Looks like scrap chain on the line. We clearing or flagging? Clear, came the reply. We don't want tension points there. Rami and I settled on the sand. I planted my knees, pulled my pry bar from my harness, and started working at the chain. It was rusted solid in places. Each tug sent little puffs of silt up, clouding the water. The cable under my hands vibrated faintly. Normal. Power humming. Data flying through it to God knows where. Then, under that, a different vibration. Talp. I froze. Something wrong? Rami asked. Talp. The cable shuddered in my gloves. Not from the load. From impact. Did you feel that? I asked. Feel what? Talp talp? Not from my side. From his. I swung my light his way. He knelt on the other end of the chain, head bent toward the work. For a second I thought maybe his tool slipped and hit the cable. Then I saw the sand around his knees. It trembled in tiny ripples, like something was moving beneath it. Talp! The cable jerked hard enough to jump in my hands. The line's moving, I said. You seeing any vessel traffic overhead? Negative, the supervisor replied. No ships within a mile. You got surge. No surge, I said. Feels like. The word died. How do you tell your boss the thing that took my father found another toy? The chain finally gave with a shriek of metal. It popped free of the trench. I grabbed it, muscle straining, and shoved it aside. As soon as the cable was exposed, the tapping intensified. Talp, talp, talp. Talp, talp. Talp. Not random. It wasn't the dam's 3 knocks. It was exploring, feeling along the line, testing its skin. Cass, Rami said, I do not like this. The sand around the cable bulged. Back, I snapped. Back now. We started to kick away. The cable lifted off the bottom in a slow, unnatural arch, like something underneath was pushing it up. Bits of sand and silt fell from its underside. The arch moved along the line, toward us. My lungs burned. Surface, I said. Primary team, surface now. Pull us. Negative, the supervisor started. We don't. The rest of her sentence drowned in static. The arch reached our fins. The cable bumped my boot and knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. Through my bones, I saw, superimposed over the cable for a second, the bars of the trash rack. The concrete spill, the curve of something pale and wrong behind it. Fuck, 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 Rami said. What is that? The chain beside us turned slowly in the current, links grinding. For a heartbeat, one twisted piece lined up with my light. 2 dog tags hung from it, fused by rust and something darker. Not Dad's. Different numbers. Different name. They flipped, flashed, then were gone as the sand underneath the cable burst upward in a plume. Something huge moved in that cloud. Not a shape so much as an absence of normal. The water temperature dropped 10 degrees in a breath. My glove stiffened. The cable bucked. The force yanked the chain out of my hand and snapped our buddy line tight. For a terrifying second, I was pulled toward the rising arch, toward that blooming cloud of black and silt and knot water. The line went taut between me and Rami. Then it jerked and went slack. His helmet light disappeared into the murk. Rami, I screamed into the calm. Static answered. Then, faint, a wet, choking sound. My training said go after him. You don't leave a buddy. You follow the line. You pull the back. The part of me that remembered empty tags in the rack said the line leads into a mouth. I made myself grab it anyway. The rope in my hand was frayed. The end was chewed, fibers shredded like something had worried it apart with dull teeth. The cable thrashed once more, then slammed back into the trench like whatever had been lifting it let go. The shockwave knocked me backward. Above, I saw the faint loom of the barge hull. A rectangle of darker dark. I kicked for it like hell had opened underneath me. Aboard, I gasped. Aboard, aboard, aboard. Diver down. Line cut. Something on the cable. No answer. The water felt thick. Each kick moved me inches instead of feet. My chest hurt. My brain screamed that I was going to run out of air before I even made it to 30 feet. A familiar rhythm rolled through me. Knock, knock, knock. Not from the cable now. From below. From everywhere. It chased me up. I broke the surface under the barge, smashed my shoulder into one of the supports, and clawed my way to the ladder. Hands reached down. Hold me up. Voices shouted questions I couldn't hear over the roaring in my ears. I ripped my mask off. The night air felt like knives. Where's Rami? Someone shouted. The only answer was the sound of water slapping the hull. 3 times. Slow. They called the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard called it an equipment failure. An unfortunate accident during night operations. They wrote his parents a letter. The company pulled the job for a week, then resumed with new divers, new cable, new safety protocols. The ocean didn't give a shit. It just kept breathing. You probably think I'm an idiot for staying anywhere near it after that. But where else was I going to go? I tried moving inland once. Stayed with a cousin for a month in a town where the biggest body of water was a man-made pond full of ducks. The silence at night was worse. No wobs, no clinking masts, just the hum of fridges and the tick of a cheap clock. And still, 3 little thuds would find me. In the headboard, the radiator, the pipes, the thing my father met under some foreign sea, the thing he fed at the dam, the thing that slid along the cable and took a man who joked about closed eyes. It doesn't live in one lake or one river. It lives in pressure, in depth, in the places where light runs out and steel groans and men convince themselves they're in control because they built the walls. It uses our shit, our dams, our holes, our cables as bones. It runs its fingers along them. It learns shapes, names, patterns. The night I found the photo on my sea chest, the one of me with grease on my face and the grouper stringer and my father's tired half-smile. The harbor outside my window breathed slow and huge. I stood at the sink after, staring at the faucet. The pipes in the wall knocked once as the heater kicked on. My hand shook when I turned the tap. The water that came out looked normal. Clear, cold. It smelled like chlorine and the faint metallic tang our towns always had. I fill a glass. The surface vibrated in tiny rings as the bass from some asshole's truck rolled by outside. Then, without moving the glass, without me touching the counter, the water in it pulsed in a rhythm I knew too well. Top, top, top. Not the glass, not the countertop, the water itself. I watched tiny bubbles rise from nowhere in the column, pop at the surface in a pattern. 3. Pause. 3. I didn't drink it. I dumped it in the sink and watched it spiral down into the drain, back into the same underground veins that lead, eventually to the river, to the dam, to the bay, to the trench where someone's sonar once lit up a shape nobody had a word for. People still drown in our county. Boats still go missing on flat, calm days. Fishermen still swear they feel something brush their hull in water that shouldn't hold anything bigger than a catfish. Sometimes, when it's really quiet, I can sit on my deck over the bay and lower my hand until my fingers just touch the surface. The cold climbs my arm like a curious animal. Sometimes it knocks against my bones. 3 times. Hello, or hunger, or both. I don't know if my father's in there. Somewhere. If parts of him are smeared along a rack in a dam, or threaded through some impossible muscle stretching under the cable. If whatever's knocking at me remembers the man who fed it, and the girl who put a bullet in a boy by its mouthpiece. I do know this. It's learning. Every time someone drops something into deep water and goes, huh, that's weird, and forgets about it, it's learning. Every time a diver feels something tap their tank and turns, sees nothing, shrugs, and surfaces, it's learning. I moved 2 blocks from the harbor because part of me still thinks if I listen close enough, I'll hear his boat's old hull knock against the pilings just right 3 times in that rhythm that meant I'm home. What I get instead are pipes and pilings and cable housings and steel. And underneath all of it, something patient. If you live near water long enough, you get used to its moods. You can tell when a storm's coming by the way it smells, the way it sounds against rock versus sand, the way the birds act. You can tell when the tide wants you. Lately, the tides here have been strange. The harbor master jokes about climate change and weird wind. The fishermen say the fish are schooling deeper than they used to. At night, when the boats creak and the bay slaps and the wind howls, sometimes there's a gap. A moment when everything else is quiet. That's when I hear it. Knock, knock, knock. I don't go down to the dam anymore. I don't lay cable. I don't clear racks. But there's a whole world of steel and water I can't see under my floor, under your floor, under every town that ever decided to put up walls against the sea and pretend that made them safe. You probably think all of this is just guilt. A messed up way of me processing the fact that I pulled a trigger when I was 16 and helped my father feed something he never should have bargained with. Maybe you're right. Maybe there's nothing in your pipes but air bubbles, nothing in your walls but old plumbing, nothing under your boat but your own stupid fear of the dark. Or maybe the next time you're on a ferry in deep water, or standing on a dam walkway, or lying in a bunk on a ship with your ear against the hull, and you hear 3 slow, deliberate knocks from the wrong side. You'll remember some stranger talking in the dark, over the sound of waves, telling you there's something down there that knocks back. And you'll understand why I won't go near still water without shoes on anymore. Why I keep my feet tucked up on the couch when the sink gurgles. Why I locked the valve on my bathtub and never filled it again. Because lakes and rivers and oceans, they don't forget. They just wait and knock.